Here we go. We're going to see how this goes.
I get to see into the hearts of coaches and athletes so quickly.
We can have this adrenaline rush in the moment and still be the image bearers of Christ that we are called to be.
My passion is for the life of Christ to be lived out through me.
I mean, Seth turned a little red when he was talking. It was really, really
I
good.
get really excited.
We want to find an easier time. We want to find a better time. And it's never going to appear. The best time is now.
Zach, you're dropping proverbs on us, man.
My work as coach is a minister of the gospel.
Man, I am looking forward to more conversations around this. You guys are the best.
Welcome back to the Competing Biblically podcast. Seth and Nick here, actually with a guest we've talked about, I think, for the last couple of weeks. But he is replacing Pancake, who is outside playing spike ball currently. All of our interns are here outside. And Nick said they got the spike ball set out. So last time Zach wasn't on the show, we had one of our highest listening shows ever. So this might be good news for us.
Yeah, we got to tag him up on social media and get all of his many followers to come follow us. Yeah, Zach is playing spike ball and in a little blow up pool with Caleb. We are coming back from a camping trip with interns. I am very tired. Seth, how are you feeling?
On the tired, I'm not exhausted, but I'm tired.
Yeah, so I am not a small human being, and I was in the smallest tent imaginable with my 4-year-old, my own doing. I brought this tent. I don't know what I was thinking. But anyway, I slept a collective, I think, 4 hours over the past 2 nights. But other than that, here it comes. You ready for it? I'm fired up and excited to be here. We're in my friend Blair Maginnis's basement. So we are coming to you from a basement, but not my basement, from Blair's basement. Blair was a roommate of mine, friend. We actually interned together with FCA back in the day with the one and only Randy Chambers. And so he's been kind of a part of this discussion for a while. We've been friends since then. I think we actually met at a college camp the year before we interned together somewhere up in Downingtown, PA. But Blair is a high school football coach, high school track coach here in, well, not here. I guess we're in Somerset County. Is that where we are?
Somerset County, New Jersey.
Somerset County. What is this town called?
Somerville.
We're in Somerville in Somerset. Blair is a football coach and a track coach at North Hunterton High School. And we're excited to have you. We're fired up is the key word. Shout out Carrie O'Neill. We're fired up.
Carrie O'Neill, big time. Thanks for having me. I'm excited. I've been listening since the beginning, so I'm excited just to talk to you guys about all the things that you've been talking about and doing. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, you've been an encouragement. I know when I first shared this out, there's some people who have listened, but Blair's been with us from the beginning. And due to this awesome app called Marco Polo, which probably because I'm shouting that out, I'll find out there's something terrible about it and have to stop using it. But we've been able to connect, and he's been giving us feedback and encouragement on this journey. So yeah, I'm excited to have you here. Excited to be here with you in your basement and hosting us for some Jersey pizza. That's the one thing I can get down with in Jersey is the pizza. So appreciate that. Thank you, New Jersey.
Yeah. And for the record, I know people can't see, Blair's basement is a little bit nicer than...
Significant upgrade.
Yeah.
A significant upgrade.
I mean, not the same ministry books and cases everywhere, but
some toys, TV, it's functional.
No plumbing.
Drywall.
On the ceiling, coming down from the ceiling.
Yeah, no poop pipes above us that we have to pause when the toilet flushes.
People probably don't realize that who listen, but at one point we were sitting right under the bathroom in the basement, and every time someone went to the bathroom and flushed, like it sounds like it's just happening here, it was loud enough that we had to stop and go back 20 seconds and restart. So we're improving in the world.
Yeah, we're upgraded. But
next year we go back, or next time we go back to humble abode.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about the process. It's not about the results.
Good transition.
Yeah, so today we're coming out of, so we're in kind of the final framing, the final, what is those things called? trusses, the final truss work, putting the roof on this house or factory that we put together with these overs. So we've been talking about people over productivity, and today we're going to transition to talking about process over results. So kind of people over productivity housed a few of these categories, and now we're over into process over results, where we'll talk about things like next week I think we have team over the individual, and then the final, it's crazy to think, but we're to the end of kind of the framework of this framework, like through all the major points. We'll close out in 2 weeks with long term over the short term. So yeah, process over results is all about focusing on the macro, zooming out a little bit, looking at where you're going in the moment, enjoying what God has you in right now, and not being so overwhelmed and overcome with where you think you need to go, or the end of the journey, not missing the journey for the sake of the destination. It's kind of like living in that "are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" mentality. You can miss all the joy in the process, all the joy in the journey. So I'm excited to dive into some of that today.
Man, as you're talking, I'm just thinking stuff. I'm excited to talk and share about this. And are we ready to dive into the scripture? Or
sure.
So our scripture for today we're gonna launch off of is in James, a really popular verse, section of verses, and it's James 1:2-4. So Blair, do you want to read that for us?
Yeah, so James says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing."
Amen. Yeah, you can get so focused on. I love it. It starts out there saying, "Count it all joy." Count it all joy when you face trials of many kinds, because this process is working out within you. I mean, everybody. It's kind of like the old saying: everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. Everybody wants a miracle, but nobody wants to be in a position where they need it. The journey and the process is part of what makes the end goal so sweet. I mean, again, we've talked about this a ton of times, but like, what are the things you remember most about your athletic career? It's the people. It's the experiences. I mean, we were just sitting here talking, Blair and I, before we started recording. We interned together with FCA, and obviously, like, I'm on staff with FCA. Blair's doing FCA at his high school as the huddle coach and applying this stuff through coaching. But I mean, it's not about the end goal. I mean, what do we remember most about our interactions? It's hanging out in the Strickland's basement. It's trips to camp. I mean, you were joking about being in, I don't know if it was, well, I'm afraid to even say these names because I might mispronounce them, but the dorms at Kutztown University have some strange names.
Johnson Hall.
And Bonner.
There's a lot. Yeah, Dietrich Hall.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Yeah, but being in the basement and goofing around after kids have gone to bed and all that type of stuff, I mean, it's the journey that you remember. One of the things that excited me to check in, and I wanted to ask you about, Blair, was this idea of process over results is like, I think everybody would attest to it. I mean, you have the Sixers who are known as the process. Joel Embiid is poster boy of the process, but they were still getting railed all over, like just ripped apart, taken to task all over the sports media landscape for tanking and not being any good, and is it going to pay off? But it all was like looking forward to the end goal is, will this team ever be good enough to win a championship? And they lost sight of all the journey in between. So as a track coach, so Blair actually helped train me getting ready for my NFL Pro Day, which I think because of a lot of your advice, I did really well. And actually, Blair's probably a big reason of why I got a nod into, I mean, because I tested so well in the standing broad and that stuff. The Giants were interested enough to bring me into camp. So I don't know if I ever thank you for that, but thank you. But being a track guy.
I forgot about that. We trained on at Dell State's on the turf. I drove up with you. I think we went up to UDEL together, right?
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Even though they didn't want to let me in.
Yeah.
So the Giants called and said, you need to let this kid in.
Yeah.
And I was like, yes. Well, yeah, a lot of that stuff, explosiveness and the process of training. So that track and field is about the process. So as a track coach, when you hear that process over results, what comes to your mind?
I think one of the things I thought about as you were saying this, like you wanted keeping the end in mind. I think it's one of my roles as a coach, and I think coaches in general, is that most of the time coaches have been there before when athletes have not. And I think that's really important because it's like, I know what it takes to get to a certain point, right? Like I've seen kids do it, or I've been there as an athlete, like my years of experience, and I don't have a ton of experience, but in my 10, 12 years of coaching, I know what it takes to get to this point where oftentimes the kids don't know that, but you're asking the kids to trust you to say, hey, I know your end goal is whatever, right? Whatever you want to do. You want to do, like in track, it's great because kids always have something to get better on. They call it their PRs or personal records. Since it's not a team sport, they always are you're not just competing against other kids, it's also you're competing against yourself. Because I can remember even when I was a college athlete too, is I would have a good day, like I would have won the meet or whatever and been upset because I didn't perform what I thought, but then I would have good days where I didn't place as well, but I'd had a better day. And I think it's important to show kids kind of like, hey, like this is what it takes to get here. And I think that's a great point to who God is, right? God knows what it's ultimately going to take to sanctify us, to get us to where he knows we can be. He sees the potential in us, right? And he sees what we can be. And as coaches, our job is to see that in kids, encourage kids in that and say, hey, this is what you're capable of, and this is what it takes to get here. And it takes doing this today, this tomorrow, this the next day. And I've changed my philosophy a little bit in track. It used to be kind of like that hard work grind mentality.
Yeah.
And my goal now as a coach, my two things in track is we have two goals, happy and healthy. I want the kids to be enjoying being there, and I want them to be healthy physically as well. So we really, really prioritize high demand, like high intensity, but for a very small dose. We call it like microdosing is the term we use. It's a really small amount, but just enough that it's going to help you, like that little bit better, but not so much that we say never let today ruin tomorrow. So we kind of that idea, and the kids sometimes think like in this world, like, hey, I have to do more. And I think sometimes that's always the case. Like I got to do more. It's like, no, trust me. The end goal is to be healthy at the end of the season, not be the best you can in week one. Like we want to be able to come back tomorrow and do something good as well. And again, it takes not just to like ask them to trust you, but to show them that you're trustworthy too. So I know that that's a big thing for us. And again, like I said, I think that's it's helpful for me in my relationship with Christ, because it's like consistently reminding me of like, hey, like I don't know where this ends up, but I do trust that like today that God is enough for what I need today. So I think that's the process over results. You may not get the results you always want because you don't control the results all the time, but you can control what you do each day. So I think that's kind of what I think of, especially in the track world. And then it helps you build relationships too, because when the kids are happy and enjoying being there and they're healthy all the time, they're not hurt, they don't dislike coming to practice, that's where then you gain their trust and you can start building relationship with kids. And that's what I like about coaching football and track. I like both, but football, I think, and some of the team sports, I think, do sometimes there's a lot of pressure on that like result. Yeah,
because you have to, like, you play every week. We were talking about that yesterday. Like, there in football, there is a test.
It's coming.
every Friday or Saturday, every Friday night or Saturday morning, there's a test coming of what did you do in your preparation.
Right.
Are you ready? But there's a win or lose moment.
Yep.
Every time. And you were kind of just saying there with track, it's not always that way. Like, it seems to be more set up for what we talk about. It's like, what's the goal? It's closing the gap between your potential and your performance.
Right.
So, like, I remember you, just little things I remember from you when you were taking your USA track and field test. Is that even what that's called?
Yeah. USA track and field.
Yeah. So when you were taking those tests and trying to get certified, I'm going to stop talking about that because I'm just going to sound really foolish and not know what I'm talking about. But when you're trying to get certified and take those tests, I remember you talking about just those progressions of when you're trying to peak and what you're trying to do. You're not necessarily looking for your best time week 1, but you're aiming to get your athletes by the time they need to perform in the season to be ready to go. I like that saying, what you said with don't let today ruin tomorrow.
Yeah, that's big for us.
So Zach ran into that wall heavy. He's not here to defend himself, so I'm gonna pick on him. So Zach ran into that wall heavy.
It was self-sacrificial though.
Oh no, it was good, but he got the taste of what it's like to be Caleb's dad. So when we go hiking as a family, so Caleb is 4, soon to be 5, or like as we say in our household, he'll be a whole hand. That's his way of saying it. He'll be a whole hand soon, but he's 4 years old, 65 pounds, built Ford tough. And Zach got tasked voluntarily with carrying him up the mountain. We hiked a mountain up here in New Jersey called Mount Tammany, and it was rocky. It was like 1,500 foot elevation gain in like a mile and a half. It was like almost straight up a lot of times. And Zach put Caleb on his shoulders and went up the hill. And then we went for a bike ride the next day, and Zach was just dragging. He just could barely get through the bike ride. But I'm grateful because I felt great because he took that task from me. But yeah, his effort one day did not produce with the same amount of effort being able to be exerted the next day, because we even talked about going and doing another hike that was very similar, and Zach was like, his eyes got big. He's like, I don't know if I can help with Caleb on this walk, on this hike, so I'm gonna have to tap out.
Yeah, I wanted to, something you said, Blair, that stuck out to me. You talked about the coach, like your players have to trust you because you have the perspective. You've been where they haven't been, and you see maybe what they can't see. Actually, it reminded me, when we talk about process over results, of I was in Deuteronomy 8 the other week, and this is the Israelites getting ready to cross the Jordan, enter the promised land. Mm-hmm. And God is speaking through Moses, and one of the things that sticks out to me the most is where God says to them, I humbled you and tested you. I let you hunger and fed you with manna, which you didn't know, nor did your fathers, so that you would know that man would not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of the Father. And like God hungered them and humbled them. He took them through the process so that they could learn to depend on God. Later on, he goes on to say, and if you forget that, if you forget the process, I'm taking you to a good land, a land where you were filled with milk and honey, and when you eat and are full and are satisfied, if you forget me, I will humble you again. And so he's like saying, if you forget the process, they're going to fall back, right back where they were. And so that just really reminded me of just the need for the process, because, and it's painted in James, where for the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. Let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. Amen. And why is the process important? It's because that's where God meets us. Mm-hmm. That's where Jesus walks with us. That's where he teaches us. I think of when I was called to college, I felt like God called me to Messiah College. Now it's called Messiah University. We could not pay for it. My family could not pay for it. What? That's the U. Oh, for university. Did not know. Anyways, I felt like God had called me to a place I could not pay for, but I knew. We talked about the Holy Spirit this weekend. The Holy Spirit really speaks to me in knowing. I knew in the deepest part of me, God had called me there. And this is through my senior year of high school. And man, the Lord just had an extra grace on me in that season, teaching me and growing me. And I've discerned that call in like late September, early October. It was June. I had finished high school, was getting ready to withdraw my deposit from that school because we couldn't pay for it. And I was like, God, did I hear you wrong? Like, I'm not upset, but what's going on? And it's at that moment that there's a guy whose son was younger than me, played on the soccer team, and was attending our actual FCA huddle that we had at our school. And he shared that he essentially felt compelled to give me a large sum of money each year to be able to attend this school.
Wow.
So complete God thing. And one of the first things, it was later that night, God really spoke to me. He said, you saw the result there, but it was the times in November, December, January, like throughout the year that I was working on his heart, that I was working on you. It was through there that I was answering your prayer, not right now, but it was all back through the process that I was answering your prayer to go there. So that process is where God works, God calls, and God walks with us. Is a lot of what I think about when we talk about process over results.
Yeah, as you're saying that, just thinking of the people of Israel. I mean, they wandered through the desert because they did not trust the process. I mean, they're saying it would be better for us to be back in Egypt. At least we had food there. They complained, and they didn't enter they didn't enter into the promised land because they were afraid of the giants, when the Lord was saying, no, trust me. Like, it's not that we don't care about results. I mean, I think one of the distinguishers in this philosophy is that for us, winning is kind of off the table, in that we trust the Lord with that. He's either going to win or lose, whatever. He's still good. He's still God. But they didn't trust the Lord with the results. They saw the giants in the land, and they didn't want anything to do with it. They said, no, we can't overcome these opponents. He's like, no, I am the one who fights the battles. You are not the one who fights the battles. Think about Gideon. Gideon goes to fight the Midianites, and with a much smaller army. Midianites have a vast army. They had been like kind of the progression, it seemed like, was they had taken all the food, they had taken livestock, and now they're back, and the only other answer is they're going to take the lives of the people. Because they had taken everything else. Why else would they be back? And God calls Gideon, who was the least of these. He was of the least tribe, of the least family in that tribe, and of that least family, he was the run of the litter, so much so that he's punked up, afraid, in a wine press, eating his lunch because he didn't want it to get stolen from him. And the Lord says, "Arise, mighty warrior." Gideon wasn't a mighty warrior, but the Lord saw him as that, so he called him that. The Lord was the one who was going to fight the battle, and he dwindled the troops down. So they showed up with men to fight and took a bunch of them out, and still wasn't small enough, and until they got down to the point where he said to anyone, take them down to the water to drink, and anyone who bends down and drinks like a dog straight from the thing, they're out. Whoever scoops the water up and drinks it, they're in, and he was left with 300. And God gives them this plan of, okay, this is the way you're going to do it. Trust the process. We are going to go. You're going to take jars, and you're going to take lanterns, torches, and you're going to smash the jars, blow trumpets, and show torches, and you're going to have the victory. And he ends up like giving this dream to someone in the camp that spreads, and the Lord and Gideon do this incredible work where they defeat this army with 300 guys. But they had to trust the Lord in that process, because there's no way that they could have won with 300 against a vast army like that, attacking them in their own camp. But we get so focused on the things that we want to focus on, doing it our way, our will, our way, versus God's will, God's way, that we can get all thrown out of whack. Similarly to the Israelites, which did happen when they got into the land and they ate of the milk and honey. They forgot the Lord within a generation.
All the time.
Yeah, over and over and over and over again. And it seems true with us.
Yeah. And I think of, you hear it in, like, I go to college, like, listen to college coaches talk, and they'll say this very thing as well, like process over results. But in reality, they want their kids to do the process because they want the result. In the end, they want the result, but they know that there has to be a process for the result. But still, in the end, I think the difference between competing biblically and competing the way the world says, because a lot of this stuff could sound very similar, right? Like, there's a lot of similarity. Like, hey, we're Urban Meyer will say, right? I'm not throwing Urban Meyer in the bus, but he's a big, like, process over results guy. But if he didn't have the results, how many people are actually listening to him, right? So I think you get a little bit of, well, what is, if we're process over results, in the end, what is like the purpose of the process? I thought when you were talking, Seth, you were talking about Moses, I was thinking of Hebrews 11, and everybody looks at like the Hall of Fame of Faith verse there. But ultimately, like with Gideon did see a victory, but there's a lot of people in the Bible, one, they either didn't see the promise of God come till much later, like Moses, Joseph, Daniel, right? I mean, like you think about it, you guys talked about my favorite, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There was times in their lives where this process looked really bad. Like, hold on, like, God, this is where you want me. You want me to, you're letting me be thrown to pit by my brothers to go to Egypt. Like Moses, Moses had to run away from Egypt, when he was there, whatever it might be. And ultimately, when you read the story, we kind of get this. I'm listening to a podcast now. The guy calls it a lullaby syndrome. We're so used to it ending well for Moses or ending well for Joseph that we read these stories of like, oh, like, yeah, like it must have not been that bad. Like it ended well for Moses. It ended well for Joseph. It ended well for Daniel, whatever. But we forget like how many years was Joseph in prison, right?
Yeah.
What was it like that night in the pit with Daniel when he was in the pit with the lions, right? Like that, you know what I'm saying? Like that's the thing. What about like, what were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego thinking about when they're about to be thrown in the fire and the guys who threw them in?
When they can feel the heat.
And the guys who threw them in died.
I sat too close to the campfire last night.
Right.
And I had to like throw something over my legs because they were burning up.
And the Bible's clear too. And it says that sometimes the process on earth is not about getting things that the world thinks are good. Because even some of the things in the Bible, it looked like Daniel ended with a high esteem, high estate. He let his family be a part of Egypt. Like his family did well. But it talks about at the end of Hebrews 11, after it goes through that whole thing, it talks about how from 36 all the way down to 40, that it didn't go well for them, right? It says, I think 39 to 40 is the right one. It says, and all these, though commended through their faith, did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better for us, that apart from us, they should not be made perfect. That ultimately, what is our goal here, right? Like, and like for me, like coaching track, I can I want to show my kids so they do well.
Yeah.
But if my goal is just to do that so I can kind of like trick them, quote unquote trick them into like doing well so that I can be brought up to esteem, then that's the wrong thing. Like I think what you said, and you said too, Seth, is ultimately is the process about building relationship. And what's the goal of building a relationship? Just so like teenage kids or college kids like you, or because ultimately you do want to share Christ with them, right? Like that's the goal. And especially for coaching, because I know, like, I think I share this with you, like I've been a part of some successful teams and some not successful teams, where right now the kids I'm coaching in track, we're going to we've done some stuff this year that have never been done in school. We broke a lot of school records and things are going well. And I share this with Nick a couple weeks ago, where like you get full of yourself a little bit as a coach or as an athlete of like, hey, like, see, I was right. The process is right. This is going well. See, like, you feel that
I'm really good at this.
Yeah, I know exactly what I'm doing. And for 3 years with this team I was coaching, we weren't getting the results, but we're doing the same thing. But it just happens to be the kids have gotten better and whatever. But even in, I would say probably I'm maybe the most aware of it as I've ever been in my coaching career. There's still that temptation to boast, right? Like Ephesians 2:9 says we have nothing to boast in. That's why salvation doesn't come from us, because God doesn't want us to be able to boast in it, that no man should boast, right? But like, oh man, like the temptation there of the result grabbing you is really, really dangerous, right? Not dangerous in a way of like gonna hurt you, but dangerous in a way of like a moving apart. Like, remember, like that's why God allowed for Gideon to do that with 300 men, right? Not with 5,000 or 10,000, because then Gideon can say, yeah, I had a really good army.
They would have taken credit.
It was me, right? And so I think that's a big part of it too. So that God did a lot of this stuff here so that ultimately it can only point to God, right? That God's going to share his glory with no one, right? Like I think that's where that's really helpful to remember.
Yeah, and that's the whole. So again, Competing Biblically podcast 2x4, competing according to the Word of God, by the power of God, for the glory of God. What is our goal? What is our aim? What is the result? the result for us, I think of the FCA competitors creed, the results of my effort must result in his glory. I think to frame this out a different way to think about process over results is Seth and I went away a couple weekends ago, and we started looking at like, all right, how do we glorify God? We jump to the results. We jump to game day. We jump to the meet. We jump to the competition, and we lose sight of, no, like as an athlete, I think someone at this conference we were at talked about being a 24/7 athlete or the 365 athlete versus being the athlete who only shows up on game day, does just enough to get by, does all the things they're asked to do. I mean, if you're dedicated to glorifying God through sport is significant. It's significant. God has given people giftings and abilities to be able to glorify him through sport. We ran the math on it.
I have it right here for you.
All right, Seth, go ahead, read the math for us.
So this math is what percentage of time you spend actually competing throughout a year. So we used football as an example, talking about 15 games.
Yeah, if you go 15 games, you end up making it to a championship game, state championship game.
Yeah.
It'd probably be about 15 games in a season.
Yeah, so that 3-hour game, we're talking 45 hours of play. 8,760 hours in a year. So you have 15 games in a year, and that's 45 hours versus 8,760. That is 0.5% or 1/200th of your time that you spend in competition.
Yeah, and the rest of your time is training. It's weightlifting. It's recovery. It's practice. It's individual work outside of practice. It's eating. It's sleeping. It's doing all the other things that you need to do as an athlete to be able to be successful. I was listening to a podcast recently where Russell Wilson shared a little bit about his training outside of competition. Him and Sierra, they spend, I think, he says over $1 million and probably closer to $2 million a year on their bodies, because that's, I think in the quote he said he wants to be able to play until he's at least 45. He spends $1 million a year. They asked him, how many days a year do you train your body, work on your body? He said 364 or 365 days a year. Now look, there's commands to Sabbath and rest and to do all this stuff, and we don't all have the luxury of having $1 million budget. I would look a lot different if I had $1 million. Well, maybe I wouldn't. I would probably just spend it for leisure and relaxation. And as I shared earlier, as we went through the four core idols, I'm going to comfort and pleasure it up. No, I wouldn't. Not anymore. Get behind me, Satan. We're not going to do that. Anyway, but I mean, he has his own. They have their own masseuse. I'm not talking about like a masseuse agency. Like what he said is that they have their own masseuse on staff. They have their own physical therapist on staff. They have their own trainers. They have their own personal trainers. They have multiple chefs. They have 2 hyperbaric chambers. Like that is the process. Now look, that is doing it. We're studying through Timothy right now. FCA's theme verse this summer comes from 1 Timothy 6:11, talking about pursuing godliness and righteousness. But in the midst of that training, it says that physical training is of some benefit, but spiritual training is for eternal benefit. It's of a much greater value. If that's the type of effort, and this isn't, look, I put Russell, this is not a commendation or condemnation of Russell Wilson. I know nothing about him personally, like to watch him as a player. This is not me diving into his personal life. But if you're willing to put up $1 million to work on your body, what if we took that same type of attitude and effort? I can't control not having $1 million. God hasn't given me any crazy ideas to make money. But what I can do is with my attitude and effort, attack the process. Attack the process of being a husband. Attack the process of being a father. Attack the process of being a coach, a mentor, a discipler, an FCA staff person. And I would empty myself out in that way. He said he trains 364 or 365 days a year. And the only time that he might not train would be on Christmas, and even then he's probably still doing some type of stretching exercise. Those aren't all full train days. There are rest days and stuff in there, but it's all according to the process to hope to get the result that he wants. And our result is not a win. It's not the result the world has. It's a result of us glorifying and making much of the weightiness and the beauty, that people would recognize how weighty and beautiful the Lord is.
Oh.
Usain Bolt just said something too. Two things. Usain Bolt said, he goes, I trained 4 years to run 9 seconds. Right? Like, so, and everyone sees Usain Bolt like, oh, he's just naturally gifted. It's like, well, and I don't know anything about, I'm not like putting him out there as someone to follow, but like, he worked. He didn't just wake up one day and he was naturally fast, but he trained 4 years.
You don't smoke every other human being
in the history of the world
that's ever walked on the planet by not training.
Yeah, he did 9 years for 4 seconds. And we were just listening to a Francis Chan thing in his the marriage book.
Yeah.
His Francis Chan's marriage book. It talks about, marriage in light of eternity. It's about, like, I think coaching, like you said, everything we do in light of eternity. Like, when I go to track practice for an hour tomorrow, or I did today, am I thinking I'm more saying this to myself than anything, is, are we doing those things getting us ready for eternity and to bring others along the way, to show other people what that is, I think too, right? Like, that's what you're saying. The ultimate goal is we're here, like that whole thing of like, it's almost a flip. It's like we have like 9 seconds to get ready for 4 years, but it's like we have this very short lifetime to get ready for eternity, and ultimately that's what God is doing in us to get us ready to be with him forever. So if you look at that, it's like, well, there's a lot of inconsequential things that we worry about sometimes.
Yeah, so a lot of what we've said can be encapsulated in this. So this is a Frosty-ism. This is from Frosty by way of Scotty Kessler. This whole idea of like, there's 2 roads. There is the road to success and there's the success road. The road to success is focused on getting to the end destination. The success ends up being a byproduct of what you're doing. It's not the goal, but it comes from being on the road, the success road. So everything that you do, you're trying to close the gap between potential and performance, spiritually, physically, emotionally. So that gets encapsulated in these 2 cars. So there's a red car and a blue car. A red car if you think of a red car, what do you think of?
Fast, sports car.
Yeah. Zoom. Old Mazda commercial. But yeah, it's like, it's flashy, it's in your face. It's proven that red cars get more speeding tickets than other cars. The red car is associated with this success at all cost mentality. Where it's all about it's the road to success. It's getting to success as fast as you can get there. The blue car, and look, the colors are the colors. They're not strongly significant. It's just the illustration that Frosty used. And I recommend, if you haven't read his book yet, we can put this in the description. He has a book out there called Making the Big Time Where You're At. It's fantastic. Just a little peek into the mind of Frosty Westering and how he ran his program at Pacific Lutheran. The blue car is a family car. It's all about the journey. It's about the people that you're with. It's about the experiences that you're going to have. It's about the God that you serve. It's all about the road. It's all about the journey. It's about the process. And it's not about just getting through the process to be what you want it to be. It's like, would Russell Wilson put up $1 million if he wasn't working towards that goal? And again, this is process over results. Not the results don't matter at all, because they matter some. It's just, what result are we looking for? But yeah, red car, blue car. And I'm sure we'll come back to that and have more discussion in episodes to come, but I at least wanted to get that concept out there as you think and process through where are you going and how are you getting there? Which car are you in? Are you a red car? Are you a blue car? Are you some hybrid model of those 2 colors, which we'll bring Sophia on that episode to break down the color wheel for us, our resident art major intern.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to wrap up with this verse because I really feel like it gets at the heart of process over results. And that is in Philippians 3. Surprise, surprise, we're in Philippians. Yeah. The Philippians podcast back again. But we talked a little bit about how the process is valuable because that's where God meets us. And Paul here is talking about I think his language here is process over results. So Philippians 3, I'm starting in verse 8 and I'm reading through verse 10, and it says, indeed, I count everything as loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Jesus Christ my Lord. So everything as loss is like everything he's gained, all the results, he counts it all as lost compared to the surpassing worth of knowing Christ. For his sake I've suffered the loss of all things and count them as rubbish, in order that I may gain Christ and be found in him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but that which comes through faith in Jesus Christ, the righteousness from God that depends on faith, that I may know him and the power of his resurrection, and may share in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death, that by any means possible I may attain the resurrection from the dead. So there's the wanting to know Christ and the sharing in with him that comes in the process, especially when the process isn't easy, especially when the process requires self-denial or self-discipline. We're participating with Christ, and that is where God meets us and conforms us into the image of his son. So I think that heart of valuing the process comes, like Blair, I like that you point out, not so we get the result, but because in the process is where God meets us and conforms us to his image. So I think that plays, really gets at the heart of what we're talking about, process over results. So I think that wraps up our conversation for today. Thank you guys for listening. If you haven't yet, go like our social media, Facebook, Instagram, and we have our episodes on IGTV now as well. So if you want to check us out on there, and invite others. If there's someone you know who is in the world of sport, please invite them. We do this not because we want to make our names great, but because we want, obviously, the message of Jesus Christ to be shared through the medium of sport. And we'd love to help you share that with those that are around you, those that you know. So go do that, and we look forward to being with you guys and talking to you again next week.